In this video, I'm going to show you how to do German short rows, and I've done one already to kind of show you what it looks like. So here I've knit across to right here where this gap is, and this funky stitch right here is part of the German short row and this gap. Now I'll show you how to do it. I'm going to knit up to my purple marker, which is the marker I'm using to remind me where to do the short rows. These green markers here signify my garter stitch border. I always use markers when I change, when I have a stitch pattern change in my work to remind me to do that change. So for German short rows, you knit up to the marker, slide the marker off, turn your work. Slip a stitch with I have my yarn in front, and like I'm going to purl, and I'm going to slip that stitch as if to purl. Then take my yarn over my needle, and I'm pulling that stitch up from below. So now, instead of a normal slip stitch, which looks like this, with just the one strand here, I'm going to pull my yarn over the needle and back around to the front and pull that stitch up from below. Let me show that one more time, because it really is super simple. It sounds, I think it's harder to explain than it is to do. So here's what it looks like right after I turned my work. I'm just going to slip that first stitch. My yarn's in front and I'm slipping as if to purl. And then I'm going to bring that yarn over to the back the whole way around the needle, and it pulls that stitch from below up and makes it look like I have two stitches on my right hand needle now. And now I'm going to purl two. Now in the pattern, the Traveling Knitter's Yarn Pouch pattern, it says to purl 3 after you do a wrap and turn. But here we're doing German short rows, so we're just going to purl 2 instead of purl 3, and then replace that marker and purl to the end of the row. Or in my case, purl till I get to my green marker and then do my garter stitch border. Now this time we're going to knit to the marker, and then I'll switch to English style to show you how this looks if you're an English style knitter. So that's my garter stitch border marker. You can ignore that one. Okay, I'm at my wrap and turn marker. I'm going to slide my marker off, turn my work, bring the yarn in the front and slip the next stitch, then bring the yarn the whole way around that needle back to the front again so that it pulls this stitch up. So instead of having one stitch on your right hand needle here, it looks like you have two stitches. So I'm going to demonstrate that again. So this is where we're at right after we turned. Look at that. My muscle memory wants me to keep putting the yarn in my left hand. There we go. So this is what it looks like right after we turned. And we're getting ready to work back this way. We have the yarn in front and we slip this stitch as if to purl. And this is what it looks like as a normal slip stitch, but we're going to bring that yarn up around the needle and back in front so that it pulls the stitch from below up and makes it look like we have two stitches on the needle. Then purl 2, and replace the marker, and then work to the end of the row. Now doing short rows is always a two-step process. You have the step of doing the short rows, which we just did. And then we have the step of closing the gaps, because the short rows are always going to create gaps in your work. And if you don't close those gaps, you'll have holes in your work when you're finished. So here's one gap, here's my second gap, and here's my third gap. And they look funky. They always have this funky stitch here before the gap. It almost looks like a yarn over right there. And there's another one. You can see it kind of looks like a yarn over. So to close the gaps in the German short rows, we are going to knit up to that funky stitch, or stitches, where we pulled that one stitch up and it looked like two. I'm just going to drop my short row marker off because we don't need that anymore. And I'm watching for these gaps here because I know the two strands before the gap are the ones that I need for this technique. We're going to knit those two strands together. Now they are kind of funky looking, so you want to make sure you get your needle in here. So I have the two strands here, but then if you look at it this way, you have this one strand right there. You want to make sure you don't get your needle in here, because that's the stitch below. You want to make sure you get it under both strands on the needle and between this strand and the needle, and then knit them together. And I'll show that again. And you knit two, and you'll be up to your next kind of double stitch. And again, you knit those two together. So you have this strand here. You want to make sure this strand is on the outside of your needle here. You don't want to put your needle in this way where you're just picking up the one strand. You need to get in there and get both those strands on that needle. And then you're knitting those two stitches together. And you knit two more. And then I'll show it English style. We're going to knit these two strands together. And then you'll continue to the end of your row. And after you knit those two strands together, it closes up the gaps, and you can hardly see where those short rows were done.